Okay, now that we have finished calculating all of our allotments for Tier 1, we got to get to how do you pay for them? Where does the money come? What is the source? And you get to state and local share. So we're going to start, this is just sample ISD, and if you'll add up these allotments over here for a regular program on down, it comes to a total cost of Tier 1 is $3,100,000 for this particular illustration. Now, school people aren't going to think about this as being the Tier 1 cost. It's a Tier 1 cost to the state, and it's the cost of providing Tier 1, but they're going to think about our Tier 1 funding. The sum of their allotments are our Tier 1 funding level. But in this illustration, you see we have $3,100,000. Okay, calculating the Tier 1 local share, the local fund assignment. This is the part of Tier 1 that the local district is responsible for raising. And so in order to show you an example, we're going to have to assume some things, and I've chosen a compressed tax rate of $1, makes the math easier, and it's also the most common compressed tax rate. And we're going to assume that the prior year value is the state funding value is $200 million for this particular district in this illustration. So it's a very simple process. It's just like doing a tax rate. You take your prior year values, you divide by 100 to get into $100 units because taxes are per $100, and then you multiply by your compressed tax rate, just like you would your adopted tax rate on current year values. So if you take that prior year value of $200 million and you divide it by 100, you got 2 million units of $100. Multiply it by 1.00, your compressed tax rate, and there's your local fund assignment. You'll notice your local fund assignment doesn't have anything to do with what the sum of your allotments are. It's based entirely on compressed tax rate applied to prior year values. Now, what's the state share? Well, it's pretty simple after that. You take the total Tier 1 cost of all of those allotments, you subtract out the local share, your local fund assignment, and whatever is left over becomes your state share. And that's what the state sends you to make you whole, to be able to provide all of Tier 1 funding. All right. Now, let's assume that instead of having $200 million, you had same compressed tax rate, but $300 million in value, your prior year value. You're collecting, remember, on current year, and so your collections could be up if your values are going up, or if, say, a large delinquent taxpayer was able to pay in a year, your collections would go up. Your collections may go down in a year, but this is based upon a rate applied to prior year, not what you're actually collecting. So you take your prior year values, which we've changed from 200 million to 300, you divide by 100, multiply by your compressed tax rate of $1, and that gives you your local fund assignment. So if you have more taxable value, if your prior year values is higher, then you have to come up with more. If your values were lower, for instance, a very poor district, then you would have to come up with less. But it would always be your compressed tax rate applied to whatever value you had. So you may get less for the local fund assignment, but it's just as difficult to raise it. And in fact, because of the growth factor, it sometimes is harder to raise it as a property poor district than as a wealthy district, even though the amounts are larger. So if you were to calculate this out, remember we had a Tier 1 total cost of $3.1 million. Your local share is $3 million, and you get a reduced amount of state share. So as values rise, there is a reduction in the state responsibility. It's cheaper for the state. And they use this money that they're saving to pay for enrollment growth. We grow about 2% a year, and over a biennium, the cost of adding new students into the system is around $2.1 billion. So it's pretty costly just to continue to fund at the same levels just because of the growth we've been having in our public schools. All right, now let's look at another one. In this case, we're going to raise the prior year values to $400 million. So we're getting a wealthier district here, property wealthier district. Compressed tax rate is still $1. And you go through the same process of dividing by $100 and you multiply by your compressed tax rate. And in this case, your local fund assignment will now be $4 million because you, at your compressed tax rate, based on your prior year values, that would be what you're expected to bring in, regardless of what your current year collections might be. So, whenever you take your total cost of Tier 1 and you subtract your local share, your local fund assignment, then you got a negative number. So what do you do in that case whenever you have a negative number? Well, what you are in this case is called a budget balance district. Anytime that your local fund assignment calculates equal to or more than your Tier 1 total cost, the sum of your allotments, you're a budget balance district. And even though this calculates to be a negative, you're always guaranteed state money. The first thing that comes to mind is the available school fund per capita. The state has a permanent school fund, and it's in excess of $25 billion, and it's been around for over 150 years and started back when the state was the first, where Texas first became a state. And it's grown over time. More money's been put into it. Some lands from West Texas are in it and investment. So it's grown pretty handily, and it provides a lot of resources. Now, you don't spend the corpus, the body of that money, but you can take the proceeds from it through a different formulation. And those proceeds go into the available school fund, which is named because those are the funds that are available out of the permanent school fund. So you take that amount of money and it funds two different things. Part of it goes to fund the instructional materials allotment, IMA. And part of it, that IMA is where you buy textbooks and you do some technology through it. And it's taken the place of a few years back when the state just bought textbooks and sent them to the districts. So the districts buy their own textbooks, but they have a fund set aside, and it's based upon their per capita, the number of students that they had. And then the rest of it goes into just per capita distribution, available school fund per capita distribution. That is your prior year's ADA times an amount of money that uses up whatever's in the available school fund for this purpose across the state. So you take that funding amount, and it varies from year to year, and you multiply it by your ADA, your prior year ADA. That gives you your per capita amount. That's what you get. Then if you're a property poor district, the state says, well, we're going to give you some more state money over here, and so here, this available school fund per capita, that's the first payment on what we owe you, and then they reduce the amount, the state share that we calculated in the last session. If you're property wealthy and the state's not going to send you any money because your local fund assignment was greater than your Tier 1 amount, you still get this money, and it's on top. It's in excess, and it can amount to $300 or $400 per ADA. So it's not an insignificant amount of money. In this illustration, we're going to assume it's $100,000. And also, you get NIFA, the New Instructional Facilities Allotment, which doesn't apply to most districts, and it's also funded at $0, so you can take that for what it's worth. And you also are guaranteed high school allotment. And in this illustration, we've assumed $35,000 was what you got for that allotment. So you're guaranteed to receive $135,000. That's the minimum you can receive from the state. And so even though your local fund assignment exceeded your your Tier 1 cost, you still get state money guaranteed, and this would be an illustration of that. And of course, we still have recapture to consider, which we're going to do in the next session. Thank you.